Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future episodes. We like to get into all sorts of fascinating topics here, but today we're taking a deep dive into the world of political science.
Okay.
We'll be exploring the connection between political science, well, science in general actually,
Yeah.
and how our own personal worldviews shape how we understand politics.
Yeah.
You ever heard that classic thought experiment?
Mm-hmm.
If a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound?
Oh, yeah.
It might seem like just a philosophical brain teaser, but believe it or not,
Right.
it connects to some pretty complex ideas in political science,
Yeah.
like ontology and epistemology.
Yeah.
Big words,
Yeah.
but we're going to break them down. Our source material today is a set of university lecture slides.
Okay.
So let's jump right in.
What's interesting about all this is that we often view politics through our own very specific, very limited lens. And that question about the tree falling really highlights how our perception shapes our reality. And that's super important to keep in mind when we're trying to study and understand something as complex and ever changing as politics.
I see. So in these lecture notes, they start off by defining politics, and honestly, it's way more intricate than I initially thought.
It definitely goes beyond just thinking about elections and politicians.
Right.
One way to think about politics is through the lens of power and resources,
Okay.
essentially who gets what, when, and how. It's all about decision making, the dynamics of influence, and how that often plays out in more formal settings like government.
But it's not just about those formal government structures, is it?
Not at all.
The notes also mention this idea of politics as a process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about your workplace for a second. Might not be a parliament or anything,
Right.
but I guarantee there's some politics going on there too.
Oh, for sure.
Like who gets the corner office,
Yeah,
whose ideas get heard in meetings, that sort of thing.
absolutely.
That's the process of politics in action. Anytime resources are distributed, decisions are made, even in those seemingly everyday situations, that's politics. It's like Aristotle said, man is by nature a political animal.
Wow, that's a great point. Never thought about it that way before. Okay, so then the notes ask a really interesting question. Can we study politics scientifically?
Mm.
And honestly, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
That seems kind of tricky to me.
It is a tricky one. In the mid 20th century, there was this movement in political science called behavioralism.
Okay.
And this movement argued that we should apply the same methods to studying politics as we do in the natural sciences. So we're talking observation, data collection, and hypothesis testing, all that good stuff.
So they wanted to find like hard facts about politics.
Yeah, in a way, yes. They were really trying to move beyond just like subjective opinions,
Yeah.
and instead develop testable theories about political behavior. So instead of just looking at institutions, they shifted the focus to individual and group behavior within those systems.
Okay. I think I'm starting to see how this behavioralism thing works. So it sounds like politicians and political scientists approach things in very different ways then.
They do, they really do. Politicians, well, they're often driven by power, by popularity,
Right.
winning elections, things like that. They're thinking very practically, very much in the short term. Political scientists, though, they're trying to uncover those long-term patterns and
Yeah.
consequences of political actions. They're all about accuracy and objectivity, even if their findings might not be popular or even easy to explain to everyday folks.
That makes sense.
Think of it this way. Politicians, they want to win votes. Political scientists, they want to publish insightful research.
I like that. That's a really good distinction.
Yeah.
Now, the notes also bring up this idea of worldviews,
Yes.
which feels super relevant to all of this.
Yes.
How do our worldviews shape our understanding of reality, of politics in general?
Well, worldview, it comes from the German word Weltanschauung, which
Hmm.
basically means the framework of beliefs that shape how we see and interpret the world, like a lens we use to filter information and experiences.
So I'm guessing everyone has their own unique worldview then.
Precisely. It comes from everything: our upbringing, our culture,
Hmm.
education, personal experiences, even the time period we live in. It all shapes our individual worldviews. And these worldviews, they play a massive role in how we understand and interact with politics.
This makes me think back to those terms you mentioned at the beginning, ontology and epistemology.
Yeah,
The lecture notes really emphasize those.
rightfully so.
Yeah.
Ontology, it's all about the nature of reality itself. What exists?
Okay.
What's real? Are there absolute truths? Or is everything subjective?
I see.
There are two main camps when it comes to ontology: foundationalism and anti-foundationalism.
You know, I'm not super familiar with those concepts. Could you maybe break those down a bit for me?
Sure. Imagine you're building a house. Foundationalists. They believe there's a solid bedrock underneath it all, a single truth upon which everything is built. Anti-foundationalists see the ground as more like shifting sand. It changes depending on your perspective.
Okay, I like that analogy. That really helps. So, how does this all connect back to political science, though?
Our ontological assumptions, they really influence how we approach research in political science.
How so?
If you believe in a fixed objective reality, that might lead you towards more quantitative methods, searching for universal laws of political behavior. If you lean more towards anti-foundationalism, you might embrace qualitative approaches, focusing on different perspectives, the social construction of political ideas.
So, it's like choosing the right tool for the job based on what you're trying to understand.
Exactly. And then, of course, we have epistemology,
Yeah.
which focuses on how we acquire knowledge in the first place.
Huh.
The lecture notes mention positivism and interpretivism as two key epistemological approaches.
What are the main differences between those two?
Well, positivism basically argues that knowledge comes from empirical observation and measurement. It prioritizes objectivity and looks for those causal explanations, like applying the scientific method to social phenomena.
Okay.
Interpretivism, though, recognizes that values and interpretations also play a role in how we understand things. It's less about explaining causes and more about understanding the meaning and significance behind social actions.
Hmm. That's really interesting. So, positivism is focused on like the what's and the how, while interpretivism digs into the why and the meaning behind things.
You got it. And just like with ontology, our epistemological assumptions, they shape our research methods and the kind of knowledge we seek in political science.
Wow, we are really going deep here.
We are.
It feels like we're exploring the very foundation of how we understand the world.
And that's the beauty of political science. It's not just about memorizing facts and figures.
Right.
It's about thinking critically about how we think about politics itself
Yeah.
and the tools we use to study it, understanding those underlying currents that shape our world.
This is already making me rethink my own assumptions about political science, that's for sure. What's next on the agenda for our deep dive?
Now that we've laid this groundwork,
Okay.
let's explore the different branches of political science and delve into the exciting world of comparative politics.
I can't wait. But before we do, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. You won't want to miss the rest of this deep dive.
So now that we've sort of explored some of those like foundational concepts,
Right.
let's kind of map out the diverse landscape of political science itself.
Right.
The lecture notes outline several subfields like comparative politics, domestic politics, international relations, political theory,
Wow.
public administration, public policy, and constitutional law. So as you can see, it's a pretty multifaceted field.
Yeah, it really sounds like a political science enthusiast could spend their whole life just like scratching the surface of all those areas.
Absolutely. Each subfield kind of offers its own unique lens for examining the political world. But for our deep dive today, let's focus on comparative politics. It's one that I find particularly fascinating.
Yeah, that sounds great. What exactly is comparative politics and what makes it so intriguing?
Comparative politics is basically the study and comparison of different political systems around the globe.
Okay.
So we're looking at the similarities and differences in how countries are governed, how their institutions work, and how citizens participate in the political process.
So why is this kind of cross-national comparison so important?
It helps us move beyond ethnocentrism, which is just a fancy way of saying the tendency to judge other cultures and political systems based solely on our own limited experiences.
Right.
By studying a variety of systems, we develop a more nuanced understanding of the many different ways that societies organize themselves politically.
So it's about challenging our assumptions about what's normal or right in politics
Exactly.
and recognizing that different systems can be successful in their own unique ways.
Right. Comparative politics also helps us identify those broader patterns and trends in political development.
I see.
By comparing countries, we can see what factors might contribute to democratic stability,
Yeah.
economic growth, or social unrest, things like that. These insights are super valuable for policymakers and anyone interested in the global political landscape.
Yeah, it's like piecing together this giant puzzle, trying to find all those little pieces
It is.
shape how nations evolve and interact.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. The lecture notes mention 6 different types of studies that comparative politics researchers often undertake,
Okay.
ranging from like deep dives into single countries to global comparisons across different time periods. For example, let's say we were interested in the role of the military in politics.
Oh,
We could study the history of military interventions in a specific country, or we could compare the military's influence in a particular region, or we could even analyze those factors that contribute to military coups across different continents and historical periods. So many different ways to approach it.
so depending on the research question, comparativists can zoom in or out, focusing on specific cases or broader trends.
Exactly.
The notes also mention two distinct levels of comparison, the snapshot approach and the historical approach.
Yes. So the snapshot approach compares different countries at a single point in time, like a photograph capturing the global political landscape
Okay.
at a specific moment.
Right.
The historical approach, on the other hand, compares the same aspects or issues across time. So we're tracing how political systems have evolved over time.
Hmm. So the snapshot gives you more of a static view, while the historical approach adds like a dynamic, time-based element to the analysis.
You got it.
Both seem pretty valuable depending on what you're trying to understand.
Absolutely. The choice of which approach to use really depends on the specific research question and what the researcher is ultimately trying to find out.
Makes sense. The lecture notes mention Bangladesh as a potential case study for comparative analysis, highlighting its rapid economic growth. What makes Bangladesh such an interesting case from a comparative perspective?
Bangladesh's success story is fascinating, to say the least. It's one of the fastest growing economies in the world. And
Wow.
understanding the factors driving this growth is really interesting for comparativists. What's really striking is that Bangladesh's economic success is linked to its investment in women's education. And that's a trend that we actually see pretty consistently in comparative studies of developing nations.
Wow, that's a powerful example of how comparative analysis can uncover some really valuable insights and potentially inform policy decisions.
Exactly.
So by comparing Bangladesh's experience with that of other countries, we can start to gain a deeper understanding of how economics, politics, and development, they all kind of intertwine.
They do. And that leads us to another interesting intersection, the relationship between political science and history.
Okay, they definitely seem like natural partners,
They do.
both concerned with power, institutions, and social change. But I imagine there are also some tensions between the disciplines.
Oh, for sure. They are closely intertwined, but they do approach those issues from slightly different angles.
Mhm.
Historians tend to focus more on the past, right?
Yeah.
They want to understand specific events within their unique contexts, emphasizing the unpredictable nature of human affairs. Political scientists, on the other hand, are often trying to develop more like generalizable theories
Okay.
that can explain and predict political phenomena across different contexts and time periods.
So historians are looking back, meticulously reconstructing the past, while political scientists are often looking ahead, trying to use the past to understand the present, and maybe even predict the future. I could see how those different orientations could lead to some disagreements.
You're right. Some historians might criticize political science for being too abstract, too focused on grand theories, and sort of neglecting the nuances of history. Some political scientists, in turn, argue that historians can get lost in the details and miss those broader patterns that comparative analysis can reveal. It's a classic debate between depth and breadth.
It sounds like a healthy tension, though.
I think so too.
Both perspectives seem to offer valuable insights, and ultimately, they both contribute to a richer understanding of politics in general.
I agree. Despite any disagreements, I think there's a growing recognition that political science and history can really complement each other.
Yeah.
Political scientists are more and more acknowledging the importance of historical context,
Mhm.
and historians are finding that the theories and methods of political science can actually offer new perspectives on the past.
Yeah, it seems like that interdisciplinary dialogue is really essential to grasp the true complexity of politics. We've
Yeah.
definitely covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
From defining politics to exploring the philosophical foundations of the discipline and delving into the world of comparative politics, it's clear that there's still so much more to uncover.
There is. It's been quite a journey.
It has.
And we've honestly only scratched the surface. But I think even this little glimpse highlights the importance of critical thinking and an open mind when it comes to understanding the political world.
Absolutely. We'll wrap up this part of our deep dive here. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to kind of pull together some key takeaways and leave you with some thought-provoking questions. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the world of political science. It's been a wild ride, wouldn't you say? I know I'm feeling a lot more informed than when we started.
It's been a whirlwind of concepts and perspectives for sure. Lots to unpack. We explored different ways to define politics, looked at how science and even just our own worldviews play a role in how we make sense of political behavior.
hmm And we even took a trip into the fascinating realm of comparative politics.
Yeah, comparative politics is a fun one.
It is, talking about how comparing different political systems helps us break free from our own limited viewpoints. That
Mm.
we can actually see patterns, learn from different approaches, and ultimately get a much broader understanding of, well, global politics.
Right. And we can't forget those really fundamental philosophical concepts we talked about ontology and epistemology. Might seem a bit abstract at first glance,
They do, yeah.
but they're really key to understanding how we even approach this study of politics and knowledge in general.
Yeah, like that question of whether there's actually like one objective truth out there
Right.
or if there are multiple valid perspectives. That's huge. I mean, that really shapes how we interpret political events and systems.
Absolutely. It's like we're choosing different lenses to look at the same landscape.
Okay, yeah, I get that.
Each lens reveals different details and offers unique insights. And then there's the question of how we actually acquire knowledge,
All
right?
right.
Which is where epistemology comes into play. Do we just rely on empirical observation and data, or do we also consider subjective experiences, that search for meaning?
The big question.
It is, and it's one that political scientists are constantly wrestling with. And those answers, well, they directly shape the kind of research they do and the conclusions they ultimately draw.
Yeah, I'm starting to realize there's no one right answer.
No, not really.
It's more like a whole range of approaches depending on what you're studying and even the scholar's own worldview.
Exactly. Political science is dynamic, it's constantly evolving, always looking for new ways to understand those complexities of power, governance, and just human behavior in general. And there's always more to learn. New approaches and perspectives are always popping up.
It sounds like a pretty exciting field to be in. So much to discover. As we wrap up this deep dive, then, what would you say are some key takeaways for listeners who might be new to political science? Or maybe even those who just want to look at it with fresh eyes?
Well, first, I think it's super important to recognize that politics is literally everywhere.
Yeah, that's becoming really clear.
It's not just limited to what happens in government or during elections.
Right.
It's in our workplaces, our communities, even our families. Anytime decisions are made, anytime resources are divided up, there's a political dimension at play.
And to really understand all that, it takes more than just passively reading headlines, right?
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
about building those critical thinking skills,
Yeah,
questioning assumptions, and being open to different, even opposing perspectives, engaging with the world in a more thoughtful, more informed way.
for sure. It's about understanding how powerful ideas are,
hmm
how they shape our worldviews, how we understand what's going on, and even how we make our own political choices.
Well, these lecture notes we've been exploring, they actually end on a pretty thought-provoking note.
Oh, yeah.
They ask, if politics is inescapable, how can we use the tools of political science to better understand the world around us? What are your thoughts on that?
That that's such a great question, a real call to action for all of us. It's a challenge to be more informed and more engaged citizens. And we can start by simply paying attention to different political systems in different parts of the world, comparing their strengths and weaknesses,
Yeah.
and just really thinking critically about the issues that we care about the most.
And I'd add that it's also about challenging our own biases, right?
Oh, yeah.
Trying to see where other folks are coming from, even if we don't always agree. It's about having that open dialogue, looking for common ground, and realizing that even when there are disagreements, there's probably a lot more that unites us than divides us.
Exactly. It's about working together to create a world that's more just, more equitable, a world where different perspectives are valued and where dialogue and understanding, well, those are the foundations for making real progress.
I understand it better myself. That brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of political science. Hope you found it insightful, maybe even sparked some new ideas. Don't forget to subscribe to the deep dive for more deep dives into all sorts of fascinating topics. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.